And I do. Anyway, so there's a little bit of that. We all have these like weird things. Now, here's the funny thing about it. Some of these weird things we're proud of. Some of them we're like, we hide, they're kind of in the background. And then some things that are interesting or unique or weird about us, we project something entirely different. Have you ever done this before? Like, you have unique giftings and talents that you wish people didn't know about you, or that might even not, you wish they weren't true about you, you know what I mean? And you project something else completely. Like, there are times where you're around people and they'll describe themselves in a way where you go like, hey, that's really cool that you think that about yourself, but no, you're not going to play in the NBA. Like, there's a little bit of this, like there's these pieces of people that they sometimes project parts of themselves that aren't accurate. And sometimes it comes from insecurity. Sometimes it comes from things that, just aren't true, but they wish they were true. You see this a lot with social media too. Social media has given us a platform to recreate and like create new versions of ourselves at times. And what we put forth is sometimes just not true. And then sometimes, if you've ever been in a relationship like this, you meet people and you assume that they're one thing or they're kind of one person, and then all of a sudden you get kind of down the road in the friendship and you realize they're actually a completely different person altogether. Has anybody ever done this before? Like 2 months into a relationship or dating somebody, you just realize that at the end of the day, what they actually were was some form of like a hypocrite. Like, there's a piece of this where you go like, it's just, I don't know how to say this any better. You probably don't use that word because you're a nice person, but at the end of the day, what you're saying is like, hey, you projected yourself in this way. You talked about yourself in a way that's like this. And then at the end of the day, all the things that you said about yourself, you're just a different person. And then you say, it's not you, it's me. And then you break up or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, there's a little bit of that. But at the end of the day, it's 100% them. You know what I mean? Like, they're just hypocritical. And you don't know how to like navigate this. And sometimes you feel this in family. Like, how many of you have a cousin, aunt, uncle that's a little bit hypocritical? Anybody experiences at the dinner table sometimes, like especially during election season? You know what I mean? There's a little bit of like, even their logic is hypocritical. You go, you're saying this all the time, but I know you. You know what I mean? Like a little bit of that. And all of a sudden you get these like moments of like being hypocritical, or you see this in other people. And then sometimes we see it in ourselves. Like, there are moments where you just recognize in real time that you're not being the actual version of yourself, that you are being a little bit hypocritical to get something that you want or perceive that you need. And you have these moments where, I don't know if you ever felt this, that you feel in real time guilty for what you continue to project to a person in real time. You know what I mean? Like, as you're sitting with somebody in a conversation, you're saying something, and at the exact same moment going, that's not true, Now, pastors do this all the time, because I run in like pastor circles a lot, and it's always fun. It's like, how big is your church? It's the best one. It's like 14,000 people. Wow. And then you're like, wow, that's great. And they're like, yeah, 13,500 of them are online. You're like, no, they're not. They're not watching that. But you get this, like, you get moments of this where you're just like, what is it in me that feels like I need to project whatever that thing is? Or what is it in me that has this insecurity that I have, but I don't actually engage with it? And can we just be honest? Sometimes you just wish that, what if we just didn't do that? Like, what if we had the self-consciousness and the centeredness to go, I don't feel like I have to be something that I'm not? And what if you could just own it? Now, the other part that's interesting, if you're here in the room and you're not a follower of Jesus, this is like the word that gets attached to Christians, I think, the most. Like, in general, if you're talking to people who are not Christians and they're talking about Christians, you just get this all the time. It's like, well, they're hypocritical because of, and then everybody has a long list of blanks. You know what I mean? Like a long list of, and whatever it is that frustrates them about, Christians in general. They had a bad experience with someone who said that they were a Christian. And it's like, well, yeah, but is everybody like that? Or, or you had a bad sort of experience. We talk about this a lot with church. One church was like that, then every church must be like that. And you go, well, that's probably not true, but it gets labeled for a lot of churches that way. Or, this too, when it comes to people who, what I would say, like, act in God's name. Like, God told me to do this, or like that sort of thing. And it's not that I don't think God tells people to do things. I think he probably does nudge people. But at the same time, you hear stories of like, God told me to do this, and at the end of the day, the only person who benefited was the person who God told them to do the thing, And then there's all of a sudden this weird gap in trust. Now, some of you in the room, you're a person who's not a follower of Jesus or skeptical of Christianity or skeptical of the church in general. And we could talk about all the hypocrites out there, which we might do here in a second. But for those of us who are followers of Jesus, I think one of the things that we have to understand and realize is this, that oftentimes people who are not Christians, their disconnect is less about God and more about people who acted in God's name. And this is one of those things that just feels like, but it's true. Like your uncle who's frustrated about all those Christians, or sometimes you can hear the word evangelical. You ever heard this? Like evangelical this, evangelical that, as if it's like a political party. And it's not, but it's always fun to talk about it that way. And it just gets projected this way. Like all evangelicals are X, and you go, well, evangelical in terms of a belief system has nothing to do with the political things that everybody's wrapping it into, and you get all of these like tension points. And so what you find is people who just assume that Christians are, fill in the blank, some version of a hypocrite, right? Now, what I want to do for just a few minutes, and this is how we're going to talk about this, right? There's a version of you that thinks about Christians and almost makes you say what we said from the beginning, like, oh, people. But you would fill it in with like, oh, Christians. You know, there's a little bit of that. And you were able to do that. And even if you're in the room and you're a follower of Jesus, and there's a piece of you that goes, I just wish Christians would not be that way, right? What I want to do for you, if you think that at all, is I'm going to let you a little bit off the hook on everything I'm going to say for today. So if you're here and you're not a follower of Jesus for the next few minutes, I think you're off the hook on everything that I'm about to talk about. But if you're here and you are a follower of Jesus, you can do a couple of things. You can put your head in the sand and go like, I'm good. I don't need to process this because you have a lot going on already. I know that, you know that. Or what I hope that we do is lean in. And what I hope that we do is we go like, if there is a label of hypocrite that's often attached to people who act in God's name or say that they're followers of the way or followers of Jesus, then what do we do with that and how do we navigate it? Now, I'm going to give you an oversimplified version of this, and then we're going to look at Jesus' words for a few minutes. But the oversimplified version of what this tension actually is this. That Christianity, right, is known for preaching love and grace, but oftentimes we have not been characterized as loving and gracious people. Can I get an amen? You know what I mean? Like, there's a little bit of that, right? Like, at the end of the day, and this is what's always so fascinating, and this is also a little bit of picking and choosing the text that we look at, an assumption that, you know, it's always just love and grace and whatever. But there's a piece of this where you go, like, Christianity in general talks about itself through people who call themselves Christians as loving and gracious. And oftentimes, at least how it's characterized, is often anything but that. In fact, some people, I love this. I hang out with people all the time who are not followers of Jesus. Like, that's part of the reason we created our church. But I'll laugh. Like, they'll go, the most unloving and ungracious person I know would say that they're a Christian. And I'm like, what's their name? Do they go to our church? You know, like, I'm just kidding. You know, there's a little bit of that. We're like, it's not just some. It's like the most. And I'll tell you what I hope that we just talk about it a little bit, because you're a good person, and for those of you who are followers of Jesus, you're a good person. We know that you are, and this isn't for you. This is for everybody else. And also, I want you to look inward for a few minutes, because I'm like a professional Christian, you know? That's not that funny. Y'all need to calm down. Y'all need to calm down a little bit. That's good. But this is me sometimes. This is me. And so the question that we're going to look at is like, who are we talking about today? But then the question that I really want you to dive into if you're a follower of Jesus is, how do you ensure that the who isn't you when it comes to this hypocritical thing? And also assuming that sometimes it will be. And also assuming that there is no, like, there's a perfection standard you're never going to meet. Me too. But how do we ensure that when it comes to the ways that we live our life, that we aren't that who for people? One of the things that I pray for our church all the time, and we're about to come into election season, so this is one of those where it's like I love to pray this over our church, is that people are going to have all sorts of labels for people that are followers of Jesus. And there are people that are going to have all sorts of labels for like the swath of people. They call themselves Christians. And what I hope is that they have those labels and then meet you and go, well, crap. I thought this about everybody, but then I met one of those nouveau people. And what does nuevo even mean? You know, like a little bit of that, you know, like, but I met one of those people, and then I met them, and I was like, they just don't fit that mold. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at passages in Matthew chapter 25. Matthew's one of my favorite areas of the Bible. I read this for fun. Now, again, professional, but I read this for fun. And part of the reason I love reading it for fun is Matthew's accounts of these moments with Jesus are vivid and they're ridiculously human. Like, he doesn't hold back from the humanity and weirdness of all of this, and it's powerful. And it's beautiful. And so you have this teaching where Jesus is teaching some of these followers that are close to him. And here's what he says. He says this. He says, when the Son of Man, he's talking about himself again, like as the Savior of the world. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, which you could, it's just so fun. You read through sort of other accounts of this, and there almost is like this powerful, coming on the clouds, angels with him, whoa, kind of thing, you know. There he comes. But that was great. And he will sit on his glorious throne, and all the nations will be gathered before him. And then there's this wildly uncomfortable thing that he says next that even followers of Jesus don't like to talk about. So when they're all gathered before him, he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats, which is this, again, you're not probably interacting with a lot of sheep and goats, I don't know, but like this piece of him where he's going, I'm going to separate people, not just based on all the things that they thought about, or believed about, those kind of things, but there is an action component connected to this. Not that your salvation is based on how good you are, because at the end of the day, no matter how good you are, you're likely not good enough to meet God's standard and what the New Testament teaches, but to go, there is a separation in these moments for people who thought that they were followers of the way and those that weren't. And what comes next isn't like a list of rules that you keep, and what comes next isn't a list of like orthodox, like, and then I believed and I checked all the things, and it's not that. What comes next is how we are in the world, how we exist in this. And so he goes on, and he says this. He says, then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, which is, I don't know exactly what that means. I really would love clarity around what the inheritance part of this is, because I really want to test that. But there's a little bit of that, you know, and then it goes on. It says, then the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world, meaning that there's something that's next, and what is next? There's an inheritance, we get that part. And what is next? There's this moment of deep interaction that's very personal to the God of the universe and you. And then he says, if I'm going to look out at how you are in the world, it's going to be an upside down kingdom, which is what Jesus taught, lived, and became in the world. He says this. He says, for I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. And I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink, and I was a stranger, and you invited me in, and I needed clothes, and you clothed me, and I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Now, here's the powerful part about this, and this is the part that I remember being in college and getting so mad. I would get so mad about this, is when people would talk about this, they would miss this. That oftentimes the assumption was that we would be nice or kind or clothe people or give resources away or sacrifice for people. And nobody said this out loud, but what they really meant were people who looked like us and people who acted like us and believed like us and leaned into the way that we did. And then if they weren't, what we would do is we would just simply take a mission trip for 3 days to go see those people, but then we'd be gone real quick. You know what I mean? Like it would be really like in and out, and then we did our thing, we checked a box, but it wasn't like a real sacrificial leaning in with my heart. I care for people and all people. And the weird, powerful, awkward theology around this is that the people being served and clothed may or may not even be people who were followers of the way, and may even be your enemy. And what would come not too long after all of this wasn't like this kind of thing where you're meeting in an Italian restaurant and there's a leak out there, but we won't talk about that. It wasn't that. It wasn't the comfort of coming in with an air conditioner that was probably a little bit cold. Are you guys cold? Just me? Okay, great. There's a little bit of that. It wasn't that. It was people who would come and give their life not for what they believe, but what they believed that they saw. And that's that Jesus came and he died on the cross, and then he rose from the dead. And because he did, here's all of my life. And because I believe that is so powerful, I'm going to give my life for you. I'm going to elevate the status of all people. I'm going to come in and live open-handedly and give my life away, not for people who just thought like I did, but for people who also did not. And this is one of the most fascinating things, is you can look at the church, I think right now, across the country, lots of different places, and you would go, often what you see and experience is I will sacrifice for people who were close enough to what I think or what I believe or how this works, and I'll do that, or I'll go do it on a very short-term basis with people that I don't actually have a relationship with. But I actually don't build relationships with people who think differently or see the world differently. And I certainly don't sacrifice and give my life for those people. And what Jesus is teaching is that whatever this day looks like in the future, where there's this separation between whatever, it's this moment of those who are followers of the Son of Man, who leaned in no matter what. Now, this all sounds cute in church, like a button up, we serve everybody. Like, there's a little bit of that. Now, what I can't imagine, though, in the early church is taking these words to heart with someone who actively pursued harm for me. I don't get that. I don't have to get that now. This isn't something that I experience very often. I don't know what this looks like for somebody to hate me because of this sort of thing that I'm doing or believing this way or experiencing this way. I don't get that like that. Like, you might not like my tweet, but I'm going to be okay. You know what I mean? Like, you might disagree with something that I think, but you're not, like, coming for me. And what was to come for these people, this is what's so fat. You read all of these historical works from secular writers about what caused the early church to explode. And it wasn't that they all just huddled up by themselves and prayed harder, even though they should huddle up and pray harder, so that when they left those spaces, they went into the world with such power. And the power that they had, and don't miss this, was to lay down their lives and to lay down themselves and to lay down their preferences and to serve people no matter what. Which makes me go, when you read this, you go, most of the critiques of Christianity, they rarely center around the person of Jesus. Sometimes around his divinity. Most of the time, not even that. It centers around the ways that people take that and then use that in their life in the world. And I get it. I also get feeling this protective nature around faith. And I also get going, I don't want to argue all the time with somebody. I get that. And I get going, I don't agree with that worldview. And I don't believe that's what Jesus teaches. I get that. The question is, for me, what comes next? What comes next when you wildly disagree with somebody on something? And then you do what? What comes next when you go, I think you're wrong. I think you're bad. I might even think you're a little bit evil. And what these early followers of Jesus did was stare those things in the face. And they said, here I am. I'm still here for you. And then Jesus goes on and says this. He says, then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you? Or thirsty and give you something to drink? And when did we see you as a stranger and invite you in? Or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick and in prison and go to visit you? Now, what's interesting about this sometimes is these passages get leveraged very specifically for just certain types of things. And the beauty in this conversation, in some ways almost parable of this, is that when Jesus teaches about these things, he's teaching about these things for sure, but he's teaching about a posture of your heart, right? And what they got is they just didn't get it. Like, how do I connect serving other people, loving other people, giving my life away, giving my resources away, giving my time away to you? Because and this is the real question that I think is so fascinating, is no matter what, and nobody says this out loud, I don't see the image of God in this person because of da-da-da-da-da. I don't see the image of God in this person because of their political beliefs. I don't see that. I don't see the image of God in this person because of the things that they've done. I don't see that. I don't see the image of God in this person because their theology is different than me, or they see the world differently than I do. I don't see it. And you don't say it that way, but we respond that way. And so the real question that they're asking is, how we didn't serve them. We didn't see, but it's not you. Obviously, it's not you because these people don't bear that same image. To which this is the beauty of the entire text. That he flips it, and he doesn't flip it like a little bit. He flips it like a Jackie Chan, like he just like comes at him, right? I don't know. He actually didn't hit anybody. He didn't. I didn't. But what he says next, though, is he says this. He says, the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters, you did for me. Why? Because the image of God is in all people. That you were created by God, and you carry what we would say is like the imago Dei, or this image of God in the world. Even if you don't see it all the same, even if you don't believe it all, even if you're a person who runs the opposite direction, right? You were created in the image of God, which means my response to you is if I am responding to someone who carries God's image. Now, if you're a parent, you know this. You know how you know this if you're a parent? You have kids. Anybody ever had somebody say something about your kids? You know what I'm talking about? Just me. Great. Well, that's when I went to prison. That was when it was. And that's how I got there. Yeah. But there's a little bit of this where you go like, here's how you know this. There's something about you saying something to my kid that is actually you saying something to me. You ever had this before? Like there's something about you cracking on, like especially my daughter. Like Henry, it will be okay. But you know, like Eleanor, I'm like, you live where? I'm glad you filled out that Connect card. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Totally kidding. That was a bad joke. That was a bad joke. No one ever fills out another Connect card at our church. Remember the day that Nuvo stopped growing? I remember when it was. No, I'm totally kidding. But there's a part of this where you go, like, there's something, you say something about them, even if they don't feel hurt about it. You ever been more hurt for your kid than they were hurt in the moment? You ever had one of these? You ever had one of these where somebody said something to them and they didn't fully get it, but you got it? You're like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a little bit of that. Like, there's something about it. And this is what's so fascinating. You get that relationship. And the God of the universe, I really believe, he didn't just go, you, not you, man, not that. But he was going, I came for all people. I came for you. You are mine. There's this piece of it where you go, he loves the world. He loves the people you don't like. He loves the people that you hate but don't say hate. He loves your weird uncle. And he's the only one. You know, like, kidding. But you get this, like, and what? Now, don't miss this. And our tendency is to create distance based off of belief or thought, or going this, and this is what's also hard, or going like very soft on saying, I disagree with you. This is not what I think Jesus teaches. Come on. I feel like we have to choose, and you don't have to choose. When people tell you have to choose, you don't have to choose. You don't have to sacrifice a biblical worldview or a New Testament worldview for not loving someone else. You don't. You can hold that and literally give your life for that same person, and those two things can exist. You can love people that you disagree with. You can lean in hard with people that you disagree with. In fact, if you don't disagree with somebody, I'm like, you need some more friends. You know, like there's a little bit of that. And you can love open-handedly. You can do good things for people and go, I feel a tension as I do it. Sometimes I tell people this. So I get this all the time. I do get the tension where it's like, I feel like if I do this, then I'm supporting this. I hear that sometimes. I'm like, when you're 90, I don't think you're going to get to 90 and go, man, I just wish that I hadn't have loved people better because I was scared of what other people would thought, specifically Christians who judged the way that I loved other people. I don't think you get there and do that. I think you get to 90 and you go, I gave my life away or I didn't give my life away. I loved people sacrificially or didn't. And I'll just tell you, when you look at these teachings from Jesus, what happens is even in the rest of this passage, the next 5 verses, there's these strong words for those people who do nothing for the people who are the least of these. And I'm just going to tell you, the least of these isn't just people who don't have a lot of money. It's whoever you view as less. Whoever you view as less. Whoever you view as more. Whoever you view as equal, whoever it is, fill in the blank. If they are a human being who carries the image of God, and if they're a human being, they do. I don't know about your dog, but like I do believe that human beings do. If they're a human being, you know, then that is a person that you are called to give your life for. Why? Because they exist as a human. And so what I want you to remember is this, that following Jesus isn't just about you. It's also about the person in front of you and beside you and around you. But what if they don't agree with me? Yes. What if they agree with me too much? Yes. What if I don't like them? Double yes. What if they hurt me? Yeah. What if they hurt somebody that I love? Yeah. Are there boundaries? Abso-freaking-lutely. Yes. What about entire groups of people that I've labeled? Yes. What if I don't understand it? Should lean in harder. Yes. What if other people that I want to be in relationship with me silently or publicly judge me for my relationship with them? Well, then you're actually doing what Jesus did and actually modeling what Jesus modeled. Yes. What if they post too much on Facebook? No, you don't have to do that. That's where we draw the line. Yes. And here's what I'm talking about. Not just felt. I could care less if you feel it. What you feel is going to change every 3 minutes, right? Great. It's your love that's evidenced by action. And this is not for those of you who are not followers of Jesus. I mean, it is, but you get it, right? For those of you who are followers of Jesus, you don't get a choice in this. Like, the answer to the question, what have I done for the person who I view as an enemy, is a tangible response to that. It's a tangible response to that. The question of like, how do I love people with action who see the world different? That's as a tangible. It's not how do you feel. I don't care if you want to hug them. I care how did you love them and serve them in a way where they go, they did. Which means this, and this is why it matters, I think, so much to our church. When we were starting our church, I would talk about how we're a place for people who have doubts and questions about faith, people who don't believe. We talk about agnostics a lot here, which is always funny because we just have a lot of people who are agnostic that come. And I got this over and over again. I still get this over and over again. It's my favorite thing. Like, you can't do that. And you know why we don't feel it isn't because of us. It's like they don't want to come. And I was like, you may not know this, but about 25% of the people that attend our church don't identify as somebody who's a follower of Jesus. And I laugh about this going, so I'll go to these places, there'll be these conferences, always pastors, like, oh, you just took people from other churches. Like, I get all that. But I laugh, and I'll say this. I say this all the time. Like, it is possible. You know why it's possible? It's possible because when people get this thing, I'm not holding on to making you something like that. I am holding on to my responsibility from Jesus to love you no matter what. And not just but just sit in a dinner party. We talk about dinner parties. If you haven't signed up for a dinner party, sign up for a dinner party, right? Just in a dinner party next to somebody who I know doesn't see the things differently, and what they just said made me uncomfortable. Like, I don't like what they said. I disagree with what they said. And I sat there and I had a meal with that person. Yeah, that's what makes this place what it is. That's what makes this church in particular unique. Everybody's got cool lights. Everybody does not have Shelby and Bobby, though. Am I right, though? You know what I'm talking about? See how I just put that on in there. You see how I did that? Harold's over there like, that's right. That's my baby. I see you. But they're a little bit, come on. I get it. But it's not unique. It's not unique in just in those ways, right? What makes this place unique is a group of people who embrace tangibly what Jesus says. And he says it this way in John chapter 13. You see this. It's so good. It says, a new commandment I give you. Right? To what? I give you to love one another. He goes on, to love one another. Just as I have loved you, you are also to love one another. And this sounds so good. Put this in a bathroom on a wall. Put it on your cool thing. It's so great. But what it actually means is Jesus died. Like, it's not something that's built on, I guess it's built on death and resurrection and the power of the two. He's going love each other as I have loved you. How did you love people? I love Peter. Even when Peter did all this stupid stuff, right? I love Peter enough to say, get behind me, Satan. And then he's like, who are you going to launch this whole church with? Where's Peter? Where's he at? The Satan guy? Yeah, that's him. Where's he at? Come on. You see all of it. You find Jesus who freely gives his life. So how do we love other people? We love other people as I have loved you. And what does that mean? I have loved you through sacrificial giving. And then he says this, and this is the part, which I give it to every church I have, and that says, by this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Which means simply this, and you know this, but like, how will people actually know? By the internal rub that they get when the expectation of who you are as a Christian is not the hypocritical thing that most people assume. That when you actually care, and when you actually give, and when you actually are sacrificing on behalf of others. So again, following Jesus isn't just about you. It's about this person, and this person, and this person. Most of which see the world differently than me. So, I'm going to say one more thing around this, and I don't know how to say it well. But I'm going to say it to you because we're about to enter into, like, I think a very fascinating season of our world and our country and all these sorts of things. And I think it's just fascinating. And typically I do a politics talk around this, which is always fun, mostly because the emails that I would get, those are always fun. And in fact, some of you don't know this. When the last political season, when we would do debates, that's actually when we ran most of our Facebook ads. And we would tailor them slightly different depending on which part of Columbus that we were in, just because you kind of know where they're at. And we just talk about this. And we talked about this principle. That was my favorite. We talked about this. So whichever side you were coming from, I was saying the exact same thing. I just thought it was really funny. That's free. But I thought about this week, and as we move forward, most of us in the room have some form of like very clear and tangible feeling and emotion around what's going on in the politics. We just started with the debates, right? Just had the whole arrest stuff going on. You have all of this kind of thing. And what's happening right now is you're going to see people, I think, on both sides, and it's been like this for a long time, but it's just going to be very deeply this, right? It's going to be very deeply this. And everybody's going to be a little bit angry. Everybody's going to be a little bit this. Everybody's going to have a little bit of a strong opinion, even people who have no idea what they're talking about, you know what I mean? And also people who have extremely clear ideas about what they're talking about. And there's going to be all this sort of stuff. And as I thought about this, I was like, what I wish I could just, if I could convince, a couple hundred people of this in our city, that's this. Is that over the course of the next little while, you're going to hear the word evangelical all over the place. You're going to hear the word Christian all over the place. You're going to hear all the tension that's going to come from this. Labels are going to be tagged with everything. And a lot of people, their immediate response is defense. So I'm like very clear verbal defense of it. You'll see this in churches too, like a very clear verbal defense of who we are and what we're doing and that sort of thing. But what's hard is, and if you know this, if you're not a follower of Jesus, you can already articulate the defenses of people who see the world differently or those Christians. You already know what the defenses are. And the other part about this is always fascinating to me is when this all continues to happen as we continue to move forward, what's going to happen is people are going to rise up to go, I'm going to defend Jesus in these spaces by my words and very articulate memes and all this kind of stuff, which is always fascinating to me, that we assume that the Savior of the world needs your defense around it. And I'll just tell you this. The New Testament did not describe a people group who exploded all over the ancient world and the message of Jesus go forward by a group of people who were banging on the table defending themselves. Exploded all over the ancient world by a group of people who stood in the face of those who they wildly saw things differently from. It says, the power of the resurrection has changed me. And no matter what, I'm going to love you. And not just like hugs and feels and that. It ain't that. It's not, if it's that, it's kind of weird. It's just, no, you don't love me. You know what I mean? It's not that, But I'm going to figure out tangible ways to serve. A handful, a few, to build relationships with people who see this differently. Some of you in the room, just to be really honest, probably don't put this part online. Yay, Auntie. Sorry. Who edits the video? Here you go. Some of you saw the Trump picture, right, this week, and you went, yeah. And you kind of put up a middle finger to everybody else. It was great. You didn't, but you kind of did. You know what I mean? And in your heart, what you did is no matter what you think about that, you went, And what it was partly that, but partly everybody who sees the world differently. And I'll just tell you this. My prayer for you is that your heart breaks for those people. And on the other side of this, you saw whatever the front picture was, and you was like, they're wrong, and da-da-da-da, and you had some version of like a visceral response to that because they're the enemy, and it wasn't even him. It was, I mean, some of it was just the whole other people that see the world so differently than you. And my prayer for you is that your heart breaks for those people. And some of you in the room, you literally could care less about the political stuff, and I get it. And you're just around it, and so you're a little bit better than because you don't care about any. You think they're all crazy. You know a little bit of that? You think that, right? And my prayer for you is that your heart breaks anytime we see anyone and experience the other, whoever the other person is, as less than the image of God. As less than somebody who was created in God's image. And you go, but I have a list of da-da-da-da-da. And I'll just tell you something, you ready? And they probably have a list for you. We all got a list. Jesus didn't say, work out all your list and then go love people. He said, go love people. And I'll tell you, at our church, as uncomfortable as it is, I hope that we are marked as people who embrace this so deeply that we frustrate people on every side. We frustrate every follower of Jesus who goes, you can't because, and you go, I haven't sacrificed any belief here, and I love no matter what. I hope they all, I hope other churches who hold that so tightly get frustrated, and they get so frustrated and they change. That'd be great. That'd be awesome. And they come in this sort of realization of going, look, yes, I hold a biblical worldview. Absolutely. And I do. I always laugh going, like, people are like, what does he really think? Sometimes, like, everybody kind of attaches things politically, which is always fun. I never tell you where I land there. And then the second one is always like, even sometimes theology. I was like, I actually don't believe that at all. You know what I mean? I kind of laugh about it. But I laugh going, like, at the end of the day, what we want our church to be known for is a group of people who love so radically and irrationally to most people. Irrationally to people who go, you can't love that person. You can't do that. I'll go, like, I hope we're irrational in that way, where we are marked as people who love by sacrifice, and it's evidenced by action. And that when people meet us, there is a rub that bothers them because it messes up with their view of people who carry the label of Christian are. So let's pray. That'd be great. Let me pray and we'll wrap up. God, I pray that for most of us in the room who carry some form of this, including me, especially me, probably mostly me, I pray that this would bother us. I pray that whatever it takes for us to see the other, whoever the other is, as human, I pray that you would do that. I pray that we carry all of our anger and our uneasiness, all of our fear of loss, all of the pieces of us that feel like we have to be so defensive about you, as if you haven't already solved the problem. Father, I pray that you would break that in us. I pray that not just through our words or not just through our thoughts or our eloquence, coolness, whatever those things are. And I pray that it would be because of the deep humanity that we embody and the empathy that we have for others, that we lean in. I pray tangibly even this week for people, they would come across somebody in their path who rubs them the wrong way, and they have to put into practice what we talked about. I pray that it would be wildly uncomfortable, and that just like developing a muscle, that they would lean in harder than they've ever done. I pray that you would chisel off the pieces of us who create the kind of barriers with other people that don't love them the way that you've called us to. I pray that you would help us to do that. And I pray that this group of 200-ish people over the coming months and the next year and 2 years, in the face of all of that, would almost feel like a remnant of people who are following your way, and that it would multiply because it would feel irresistible to people who disagree with us. We love you and we thank you for that. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.